Imagine standing on the jagged white cliffs of Dover in the summer of 1588. The air is biting cold and tastes of salt and fear. You look out toward the horizon, and the blue of the English Channel is gone. In its place is a floating forest of oak. 130 massive Spanish warships, the legendary Armada stretching for miles, their sails painted with massive crimson crosses that look like blood against the gray sky. Seriously, it looked like game over for England. This was the most terrifying naval force ever assembled, and they were coming to crush a tiny island nation that was broke, divided, and led by a woman. The world thought was far too weak to lead. But listen to this, because this is where the story stops being a history lesson and starts being a masterclass in survival. Queen Elizabeth I was backed into a corner. Her treasury, completely empty. Her army, outnumbered and outgunned. Every king in Europe was already placing bets on how many days it would take for London to fall. But they forgot one crucial thing: never underestimate a leader with nothing to lose. While Spain was playing by the old rules of size and brute force, Elizabeth and her inner circle were looking for a glitch in the system. They knew that in a fair fight they would lose. So they decided to stop playing fair. Enter Sir Francis Drake. He was a pirate, a rebel, a man who didn't care about the gentleman's code of war. While the Spanish galleons were towering fortresses, they were slow. They were clunky. They were legacy systems in a world that was about to change. England had the speed. On a pitch-black night, as the Spanish fleet sat anchored in a tight defensive formation, Drake launched his secret weapon. He didn't send soldiers, he sent 8 hell burners. Imagine 8 old ships packed to the brim with gunpowder, pitch, and sulfur set on fire, and sent drifting like ghosts through the mist straight into the heart of the Spanish fleet. The result was absolute pure chaos. The Spanish captains panicked. They could hear the wood groaning and the fire roaring toward them. They did the unthinkable, they cut their anchors and scattered into the dark. And just like that, the invincible formation was broken. This is the moment everything changed. This is the pivot. Elizabeth didn't hide in her palace. She rode out to the coast on a white horse, wearing golden armor that caught the morning sun. She stood before her soldiers and shouted words that still echo today: "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Wait, there is more. Just as the English began to strike, nature itself joined the fight. A massive storm, history calls it. The Protestant wind slammed into the retreating Spanish ships. They weren't just defeated by cannons, they were being ripped apart by the very ocean. They tried to dominate. By the time the clouds cleared, Spain's dream of empire was dead, and England's global era was born. This wasn't just a military win, it was a total rebrand. Elizabeth turned a tiny bankrupt island into a global superpower. So what is the takeaway for your career? What is the Armada standing in your way right now? Is it a massive competitor with a bigger budget? Is it a market that feels too crowded? Listen to this: being too small is actually your greatest advantage. Agility beats size every single time. While the giants are struggling to turn their massive rudders, you can move, you can pivot, you can strike. Don't waste your energy trying to build a fortress, build a fast ship. Take a page from Elizabeth's book, own your power, break the rules, and leave a legacy. See you in the next one. But here is the twist. Most people think the story ends with the ships sinking and Elizabeth dancing in the streets. That is a lie. The reality was much darker. The victory was a miracle, but it left England bleeding. The treasury was not just empty, it was in a deep hole of debt. Spain was still the richest empire on earth, with gold mines in the Americas that could buy the whole world twice over. They were already building a second armada and a third armada. Elizabeth realized that winning one battle was just short-term survival. Staying at the top was the real war. She was sitting in her cold palace, knowing that her nation was one bad harvest away from total collapse. This is where the story turns from a military thriller into a masterclass in strategic scaling. Elizabeth did not have the money to build a permanent navy that could police the world. So she did something that changed capitalism forever. She created the ultimate startup. She gave a group of adventurous merchants a royal charter to explore the East Indies. This was the birth of the East India Company. Imagine the audacity. A private company given the power to raise its own army, coin its own money, and negotiate treaties with kings. She outsourced the risk of empire building to the private sector. If they failed, the crown lost nothing. If they succeeded, the crown took a massive cut. This is the definition of leverage. She turned her lack of capital into a global competitive advantage by unleashing the power of self-interest. But leadership at this level comes with a terrible psychological price. While she was rewriting the rules of global trade, her inner circle was rotting from within. You have to understand the Zygarnik effect here. The unfinished business of her personal life was catching up to her. Enter Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. He was the Queen's favorite, young, charismatic, and brilliant. But he was also infected with the poison of entitlement. He thought the aging Queen was becoming weak. He thought he could do a better job. He staged a rebellion in the streets of London, hoping the people would rise up for him. Imagine the heartbreak. The woman who had saved the nation now had to face a revolt, led by the man she loved most. This is the moment we see the raw and unfiltered power of a true leader. She did not hesitate. She did not let emotion cloud her judgment. She ordered his arrest and signed his death warrant. She knew that in the game of power, sentiment is a weakness that leaders cannot afford. She stood alone in her chambers watching the sun set over a nation she had rebuilt from the ashes. She had no heir, no husband, and now no favorite. She had traded her personal happiness for the survival of the brand. She had become the Virgin Queen not just as a title, but as a strategic identity that made her untouchable by any foreign king. Think about your own journey. As you scale your business or your career, your biggest challenges will not be the giants outside. IT will be the internal friction. IT will be the people who were with you, in the trenches, but cannot handle the view from the top. Elizabeth taught us that to build a legacy, you must be willing to protect the core mission at all costs. She moved from tactical defense to systemic dominance. She stopped fighting fires and started building an infrastructure that would last for 300 years. The Armada was the pivot, but the corporate empire was the goal. She transformed a pirate nation into a corporate superpower by changing the definition of power from brute force to economic flow. But wait, because the story gets even darker and more brilliant at the same time. Imagine this. Elizabeth is now in her 60s. Her face is scarred by smallpox, her teeth are black from too much sugar, and she is losing her hair. But to the world she is still the Gloriana. She is the brand. She forced her painters to use the mask of youth, a strategic propaganda tool that made her look eternal. She understood something that modern CEOs often forget. Your personal brand is not about who you are. IT is about what people need you to be. She became a living icon to stabilize a nation that was terrified of what would happen when she died. The Virgin Queen was not just a lifestyle choice, it was a survival strategy to keep every power-hungry prince in Europe at arm's length. Letter 1 EBF Nayan Hay. While the world was distracted by her golden dresses and poetry, Elizabeth was quietly building the most sophisticated intelligence network the world had ever seen. Led by Sir Francis Walsingham, her spy master, they created a system of cryptography and double agents that would make the modern CIA jealous. She realized that in a world of giants, information is the only currency that matters. She knew what the King of Spain was eating for breakfast before he even sat down. This is the lesson for every startup founder today. Data is not just numbers on a spreadsheet, data is your defense system. She did not just guess her way to greatness. She calculated every move based on cold hard intelligence. And here is the real kicker. The Zygarnik effect was in full swing regarding her succession. She had no children. The entire country was holding its breath, waiting for the chaos of a civil war the moment her heart stopped beating. But Elizabeth was playing the long game. She refused to name an heir until the absolute last second. Why? Because she knew that the moment she named a successor, her own power would evaporate. People would start looking to the future instead of obeying the present. IT is the ultimate founder dilemma. How do you prepare for an exit without losing control of the board? She managed the tension with masterful silence, keeping everyone in a state of productive anxiety. Vaki Letter 1 EBFT law, or rather the pivot to the future. In her final years, she did not just sit in a cold palace. She invested in the mindset of her people. This was the age of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and Spencer. She realized that an empire is not just built on cannons, and coal IT is built on narrative. She funded the arts to create a national identity that was unbreakable. She turned Englishmen from a bunch of divided rebels into a cohesive cultural force. She was the first to realize that soft power is the ultimate multiplier. She created a story so powerful that even 300 years later, the world still looks at the Elizabethan era as the peak of human achievement. B letter 1 EA1 N Tate 1 EDT, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EDF NGT, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EE3 NG ZEM. On her deathbed, she finally gave the signal. The crown would go to James of Scotland. IT was a seamless transition that no one thought was possible. She had taken a bankrupt, broken, and terrified island and turned IT into the blueprint for the modern world. She taught US that leadership is not about being liked, IT is about being effective. IT is about the cold calculation of risk and the radical bravery to stand alone. She left behind a system that could function without her. And that, my friends, is the ultimate goal of any leader. To build something so strong that your absence does not cause IT to crumble. D-O letter 1 EA1 NAM letter 1 EDBI Hey Ni. The real legacy of Elizabeth was not the gold she accumulated, but the infrastructure of ambition she left in the hearts of her people. She proved that a small team with the right strategy, the right data, and an unwavering will quintuple the largest monopolies in the world. She was the original disruptor. She did not just defeat the Armada. She rendered the entire Spanish model of empire obsolete. The world moved from land-based feudalism to sea-based capitalism because one woman refused to play by the old rules. But here is the thing. Elizabeth did not just die. She ascended into the fabric of history. She proved that power is not given, IT is taken through narrative and systemic design. Tia letter 1 EBF9 Hey. You might be sitting there thinking, well, I am not a queen. I don't have a navy. But you are wrong. You are the CEO of your own life. Your armada is that voice in your head saying you are not enough. Your Walsingham is your ability to read the room and gather data. Your East India Company is that side hustle, or that vision you are still too afraid to scale. Letter 1 ED3B, letter 1 EA1N, letter 1 ET, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EED, FNGT, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EE3 NG ZEM. The greatest lesson from the Virgin Queen is not about war. IT is about identity. She refused to be defined by her limitations. She turned her gender into a shield, her lack of heirs into a bargaining chip, and a debt-ridden island into the center of the world map. She did IT by staying true to the core mission. When the world told her to marry and become a footnote in some king's story, she chose to be the whole damn book. That is the definition of unstoppable. D-O letter 1 EA1 NAM letter 1 EDBI Hey Ni. The Zeigarnik effect tells us that the human brain hates unfinished business. Elizabeth knew this. She left the world with a question mark that forced the next generation to step up. She built the stage, but she let us write the script. She taught us that to truly rise, you must be willing to burn the old rules. You must be willing to send in the hell burners when the giants are blocking your path. Truly, she was the original disruptor. Veki letter 1 EBF a legacy that lasts 500 years. But what about yours? What is the legacy you are building today? Are you playing small because you are afraid of the Spanish ships on your horizon? Or are you ready to own your power and pivot? Greatness requires the courage to be unpopular, the discipline to be alone, and the vision to see the world not as it is, but as IT could be. Success is not a destination, IT is a consistent state of rising. H letter 1 EA3. B letter 1 EA1N, V letter 1 EABN, Con Dang Cia letter 1 EDD, D stroke, letter 1 EE3I, ML letter 1 ED9 TD, letter 1 EA5 UHI, letter 1 EC7 USAO. This is IT. This is your white horse moment. Elizabeth did not wait for permission to be great, and neither should you. The world does not need more people who fit in. IT needs men and women who are willing to stand on the cliffs. Look at the impossible odds and say, not today. IT is time to stop defending your turf and start building your empire. I want to hear your story. I want to know about the armada you are facing right now. Is IT a failing business, a toxic environment, or just the fear of the unknown? Whatever IT is, you don't have to face IT alone. Send me an email at vodokviankny12@gmail.com. Let us talk about your pivot. Let us talk about your rise. Because the world does not need more followers. IT needs leaders who are brave enough to be the exception. This is Men Rising. And your story is just beginning. See you in the next one.